Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Just wanted to let you all know that the panel is being recorded. So just a heads up. And I think we've got everyone trickling in from the waiting room. So I think we can go ahead and get started. Yeah.
Sounds
Hi, in case you don't know me, I am the editor-in-chief of the offing. My name is Mimi Wong. And so, I'm really excited to be joined here today by three of our offing editors who will be chatting with me about their work as editors and how they see that work aligning with our larger mission of building community at the Offing Literary Magazine. We also have with us our executive editor, Ashaki Jackson, who will just kind of be helping me to monitor the chat and helping to also admit folks in from the waiting room. So she's just there too, just so you know. I think we have one more guest joining us, so it's really good to see everyone here. Any other, let's see, just quick business. We are just, hosting this virtual table. This is our first time doing this. So kind of thank you for being part of this experiment with us. But so far, it's been really nice kind of getting to meet people this way. And, we can all kind of convene from the comforts of our various apartments, hotels, and, wherever you're at today. So thank you again for joining us. I'd like to just begin by introducing our editors who are with us today. So I'm going to, read everyone's bios, and then we'll proceed with some conversations. But I would really like to encourage you all to, ask questions, and you can place your questions into the chat as we're going. Ashaki will help me monitor that, and we'd really like this to be a conversation with you. So definitely please feel free to type your questions into the chat as we go. So I'd like to begin by introducing our associate poetry editor, Crisosto Apache. Crisosto is originally from Mescalero, New Mexico, on the Mescalero Apache Reservation. Currently lives in the Denver metro area in Colorado with their spouse. They are Mescalero Apache, Chiricahua Apache, and Dene of the Salt Clan, born for the Towering House Clan, and is assistant professor of English at the Rocky Mountain College of Art and Design. They hold an MFA from the Institute of American Indian Arts in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Crisosto's debut collection is Genesis from Lost Alphabet. Crisosto's second forthcoming collection is Ghost World, out by Gnashing Teeth publication sometime in mid-2022. I'm really looking forward to that. Some of the poems in this collection have appeared in the Rumpus, Lock Raven Review, the Poetry Foundation's Poetry Magazine, Anomaly Magazine, Digging Through the Fat, McGraw-Hill Publishing, and most recently, When the Light of the World Was Subdued, Our Songs Came Through, edited by Joy Harjo. Their pronouns are they, them, theirs, gender non-conforming. Next, I'd like to introduce Bix Gabriel, who is our Enumerate Editor at the Offing. So Bix Gabriel is a writer, teacher of creative writing, editor at the Offing Magazine, debut Paraplus founder, co-founder of Take Two Services, occasional tweeter, and seeker of the perfect jalebi, which is a food that Bix was just telling me about today. So I am learning from her. She has an MFA in fiction from Indiana University Bloomington, and her writing appears in the anthology A Map is Only One Story on Longleaf Review, Catapult, Guernica, and Electric Literature, among others. Her debut novel, Archives of Amnesia, was a finalist for the 2021 Penn Bellwether Prize for Socially Engaged Fiction. She was born in Hyderabad, India, and lives in Queens, New York. And finally, we have Vonetta Young. Vonetta Young is a writer and financial services consultant based in Washington, D.C. Her essays have appeared in Indiana Review, Barrow House, Lunch Ticket, and Catapult, among others. Her short fiction has appeared in Cosmonauts, Gargoyle, and the anthology Furious Gravity. She serves as senior fiction editor for The Rumpus, Insight Editor for The Offing, and assistant flash editor for Hippocampus. Vonetta has completed a memoir about growing up with an emotionally abusive father who is the bishop of 3 churches. She is currently writing a story collection about Black women being messy. Follow her on Twitter at Vonetta Writes. So, welcome everyone. As you can kind of hear already from everyone's bios, you all do a lot beyond just, editing at the offing. You're all writers in your own right, working on your own projects and contributing to other journals and magazines and organizations. So there's a lot going on. And I just kind of wanted to start out by, asking each of you, and maybe we can just go, one by one. Maybe I can start with you, Bix, but, what was your journey to the offing and how did you become an editor?
Thank you, Mimi. If people have trouble hearing me, please let me know, because I'm in a place where I keep getting a message that my internet connection is unstable. So I really don't know what you hear or see. It's ironic that you're asking me this and we're doing this panel at this very moment, because I first got introduced to the offing in 2015 at AWP, or right before AWP, and I am at this moment actually in the business center of my hotel lobby attending AWP, in 2015, I was very, very new to the literary world and didn't know anything really about even how lit mags really worked. All I knew was like you get rejections from them, and I'd already experienced that, so I was curious, and I applied because the offing had literally just launched. I think it had launched maybe a couple of months before, and at the time the fiction department was looking for readers. And so I applied, and somehow the editors thought, it was worth me joining for whatever reason. I'd love to read, so obviously we all do. We're editors and writers. And so I started as a reader, and then, did that for some time. I don't remember exactly how long. And then was brought on as an assistant editor, and time goes by and you kind of learn the job, and eventually was the fiction editor, or a co-fiction editor for a couple of years, and then I think I became the editor of Enumerate, which is our list cross-genre, one of our cross-genre departments. I think it was in 2019, but honestly, like most people, time is completely a warp for me, so I don't know how long ago it was, but that's been my journey, and it has just been a pleasure to see the magazine grow as it has, and also to read all of the work that comes through.
Thank you, Bix. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, Crisosto, I'd love to hear how you came to be an editor at the offing.
Well, thanks again for having us here today. For me, I actually started off as a reader. I was referred here by one of the previous some people who have submitted work, Alyssa Washida. She sent me an email because she ended up going to IAIA, where I graduated from for my graduate degree, and doing a craft lecture there. And I ended up talking with her for a little bit. She was there reading from her book, My Body is a Book of Rules. So we started communicating over email, and she said that the offing was looking for volunteer readers. I had never done that before, but I remember in college participating in some of the college editing for their campus anthologies and journals. So that's really my background experience with that. But she encouraged me to apply because she thought I would do really well here. And I wasn't really sure what the reader's responsibility was when I started. But once I got I had a good hold of it, I really enjoyed reading the work. One thing that I really am always captivated by with the offing is the wide range of submissions that do come through. I wasn't really sure what to expect at first, but once I had access to the submittable and started going through all the assignments that I was given, I was just really blown away by the kind of work that was being submitted there here at the offing. And I think for me, that was very inspirational. It really motivated me to sort of look at the work as to what people were submitting, and even the craft that was being put into the work. It made me challenge myself a little bit more in terms of my own work. But I think, you know, the honor in that is just that I was able to see a lot of the various different styles and content within the work itself. So I started off as a reader, and the longer I stayed, I think it was like 2017, I believe, 18 maybe, that I've been with the offing. But I was a reader for a number of years before Luther at the time was the editor for the department. Started like, you know, nagging, not really nagging me, but pulling, you know, my collar, saying that I should learn more about the offing so that I could help him, you know, move the poetry department a little bit more forward. So there was two positions that were created at that time, and one was the associate and the other one was the assistant. But I think still here we're still trying to figure out how to make the department evolve. But I think because we're able to section it off a little bit and divide the responsibilities, it makes the background work a little bit easier. It makes the flow of the work smoother for the amount of submissions we get in. And we do get a lot of submissions in.
Yes, you manage a large volume of submissions, and I definitely want to get into that more, you know, as we talk. So thank you, Crisosto, for sharing your journey to the offing. You know, finally, Vonetta, I'd love to hear, you know, how you came to us at the offing.
Sure. So I guess the very brief backstory is I didn't do an MFA. I undergrad degree in English. I have an MBA, and after leaving my job in private equity, decided to become a full-time writer to work on my memoir. And I took a bunch of, I had done, you know, writing workshops in undergrad, but wanted to really fully immerse myself back into being a student of writing. And I took a ton of classes, just kind of like back to back, and spent like 2 years doing what I called a DIY MFA. So sort of, you know, kudos to Sackett Street and Catapult and Gotham and all of the classes that I took in person and online. But when I got to that sort of, after doing classes for 2 years, I said, now I'm at the place where I just need to read a lot of stuff. And what's published, I'm like, I can tell it's been edited to get to the perfection of the place of publication, but I wanted to read slush. I wanted to read submissions to say, you know, what's been the journey of this really awesome work that I've been reading that's already in the world. And so I think I was actually just like in my Gmail trying to figure out how I wound up writing to the offing. And I can't remember if Ashaki had posted something to the Black Binders, and I feel like that must have been it. But I wound up sending just an interest of volunteer readership to the offing because I wanted to read a bunch of essays. And so that means I also started as a reader at the early 2019, I believe, and was promoted to editor, I think the following, or assistant editor the following year, and editor the year after that. So certainly, I think that that's been a kind of a theme here of all of us having that really valuable experience of just reading a lot of stuff. And I think for me, it's made me a better writer, but also a better editor as well, just getting sort of breadth of what's out there, not just, you know, what's been kind of edited to the gills and is perfection that we see in the world, but, you know, like I said, where did that work begin? Like, was it perfect when it came into submittable, or were there some steps that were taken in between? So that's how I got here.
Yeah, no, Vonetta, can you hear me all right? I think my internet connection's unstable for a second, but I think I'm back now. But yeah, I really wanted to say how much I relate to what you were saying about kind of building a DIY MFA experience, because I also did not get an MFA. So I think, you know, early on in my writing career, I found that really intimidating, right? To be someone, to try and be a writer and not necessarily have that kind of institutional framework or support. And I will say personally, that was also the motive factor for why I wanted to start volunteering with the offing as well. Like many of you, I started by helping out and reading, and I started as an editorial assistant in the Enumerate department. So yeah, I think kind of this overarching theme here is that we all sort of came here to learn, to find a different way to learn that maybe wasn't taught to us in our undergrad or, you know, graduate creative writing workshops that maybe we weren't getting elsewhere. So I think that's why we have such deep appreciation for the space that the offing offers. So yeah, I did want to ask each of you, you know, now that you have gone through that experience of reading and have, you know, become, you know, editors in the department, what do you see the relationship between, you know, editing and kind of helping to grow this communal space, to grow this community? What do you think that relationship is? You know, maybe Vonetta, you could start us off.
That's a really excellent question. I think one of the things that comes to mind for me with Insight in particular, and Insight is a unique section that it's technically at the offing, it's considered cross-genre, but I describe it as personal essay meets cultural criticism. It sounds much more like personal essay, but there are some aspect of the culture that is described. And I think for me, it's been a really awesome opportunity to highlight stories that otherwise either might not be highlighted or might not be thought of. And I can say this and hopefully not sound too pejorative, because I write personal essay myself, but I was like, I don't necessarily want to hear yet another story about, like, I don't know, family trauma, or, you know, so all the things that I write about, and like, I don't want to read these things necessarily anymore. But the way that I've been able to help publish, say, I think about T.L. Pavlich, who had this gorgeous essay about their transmasculine person, about their time in beauty pageants when they were a little girl. And it was just, to me, community is highlighting those stories that we might not have even known, you know. And to me, I think that's really important, and it helps to you know, show not just the robustness of, you know, our literary community, but, like, not to sound super soft, but the robustness of humanity. And I think that that's one of the joys of getting to publish, especially in my particular type of section.
Yeah, Crisosto, Bix, either of you want to add to that?
Well, I think in the poetry section, I think for the amount of submissions we get for that department, I think one of the things I learned early on, again, is the vastness of the submissions that have come through, and the various diversity and the voices of each of the works that come in. The offing, in terms of the writing that comes in, has really taught me a lot in terms of the voice, and then how the voices in each of the works that have been submitted carries themselves in each of the submissions. So one thing I realized earlier on is that I'm not just dealing with like one way of writing a poem, but given the idea of where these poems originate from, it makes me think about all the different perspectives that are out there, and sort of recognizing that in the work itself. So trying to find a definition for me and how I associate with the work that is being submitted in the offing for the poetry section has been challenging, because what I've been taught in terms of poetry and the voice and the persona, it is really different experiencing the wide range of expressions in the poems that are received, because of where they come from. I didn't realize, I learned this over time, that the submissions that come through the offing don't only come from the United States, they come from abroad. So I had to take that extra step to sort of begin to do a little bit of research to familiarize myself with like what was going on in these various different parts of the world. So for me, broadening the scope of how I looked at poetry now, it has been a huge stride of improvements in what I look at as far as the work itself, which I think is kind of an amazing feat. And I think that's why I'm always amazed when I go through a lot of the submissions, and what I'm looking for, it may vary from submission to submission because of how diverse those voices are, how diverse those perspectives are, and even the way that the poems are constructed in themselves. So I'm like always looking and always, double checking to see if I'm looking at the poem the way that it should, because again, it's so diverse, and it's kind of an honor to kind of read the various diversity in the work. One of the things that I do with the offing, and I just have done this recently with my creative writing classes, is I have them go to the offing and have them look up a lot of the various different writings that have come through, just to give them an idea of the persona, the voice, the various different themes, and even just the wide range of the submissions that come through and what poetry should look like.
I don't have a lot to add because Vonetta and Crisosto said such wonderful things which ring true for me. The only thing I will say is, part of the reason I came to the offing is because of its mission. And I think, there is truly a commitment to creating ways for people whose work may not easily make it into the literary mainstream or the world. And that, I think, even with all of the talk and changes that are actually happening in the literary world, I think that still is really, really huge and true. And I want to say that even a couple of years ago, I was like, oh my God, we have so many departments. Why are we so big? And I now have rethought that position, because I think one of the things that I really love about the offing is I get many submissions where people write and saying, I think, so mine is the list department, which can be kind of almost any type of list, right? And I get submissions from people saying, I just thought that this department would be the right fit for the kind of work that I'm doing. And there are very few other venues that will focus either on a particular form or a particular style, or in addition, and also the content and themes that and the types of writers we're interested in, like new writers from typically marginalized communities, all of these things. So I just want to say that, I think part of what makes me really excited about the offing still, after several years here, is that this community is growing larger, and that we occupy a particular space that people still find really useful for their work. Because I think in part we have all of these different departments with our different interests. Yeah.
Thank you, Bix. I just want to quickly say, I would love to receive any questions from people in the audience on the Zoom with us. So please feel free to type those into the chat, and we can pose your questions to our panelists here. But while we wait for people to generate some questions, Bix, I wanted to follow up on what you just said, because you kind of anticipated a question that I was going to ask you, actually, which was, I know that you moved from being a fiction editor to Enumerate, and that was really exciting. I think you kind of bring your own vision and your own kind of editorial stamp to that. And I'm just curious, like you sort of touched on this about your interest in maybe hybrid genre and the possibilities of that, and maybe how that's not always available for everyone. So I just wonder if you could speak a little more about, your interest in that.
Yeah. Thank you for this question, Mimi. And I'll try not to go on too long. But partly when I came to the offing, as I said, I didn't know very much about the literary world. And I knew even less about experimental writing. Quite frankly, I really learned how to read non-literary work at the offing. The first year's reading, and I still read a lot of the stuff, submissions that we get. And I think that the list form, this is something that I really love about the offing. Like, I was a fiction editor, that's my background. I'm a fiction writer. I also write other things. Do I specialize in the list? No, but I love the list form. And I've always been really intrigued by the possibilities of what an enumeration could be. And so, that's kind of, it's just something that I really appreciate and interested in and curious about. And I will say that, like Crisosto was saying, I've really found myself stretched by the submissions that we get a lot of times in terms of what can be, what can be a list. We recently published work which was a collage, and it did use sort of an enumeration of sorts, but it was collage work, and I thought that was just really brilliantly done. We've had, just a whole range of across all kinds of genres. Poetry, essay, fiction, and some amalgamation of all of those as well. So I think I don't know, maybe if I'm answering your question, but I do want to say that I think that it can be a home, the offing in general, and speaking about Enumerate, it can be a home for work that isn't easily slotted into what people think of as the traditional homes for fiction or poetry or essay.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, like you were saying, the kind of the fact that we have so many editors who are interested in experimenting with genre, or, kind of offering, different types of spaces, different types of forms for people to write in. I think that is really valuable. And I kind of wanted to ask Vonetta a similar question, because you are also editing a sort of cross-genre department. And I remember our kind of first call where I think I was, quote unquote, like interviewing you to be a reader at Insight. And you asked me this really challenging question. You were like, well, what is your vision for Insight? And I was like, what? Like,
I think I was just trying to show that what can I do to pretend that I'm smart so they take me on as a volunteer?
But no, I had to give that a lot of thought. And so what I really enjoyed about, the time that we were kind of working together in that department, because you started as a reader, but very quickly, you became like my co-editor, and we were really, I think, collaborating together. And now, it's sort of become your baby. And I'm just, in addition to a real life baby, but I'm curious, kind of as Insight has evolved, like, what was your sort of personal editorial eye that you?
Yeah, no, I do. I remember, and the time that we spent collaborating was really helpful for me to figure out. I'll be honest, I'm a very straightforward thinker. I write fiction that's very realistic. I write nonfiction that's also, yeah, I can rehash family trauma until the cows come home. And so for me, it was like, oh, this is curious. I hadn't thought about putting these things together. And so what does that look like? And I think the initial couple of essays that we looked at together, I was kind of trying to figure out, what is this mesh that I'm looking for? What is the rubric or the kind of criteria? And then I think, and actually I do think it was TL's essay that really kind of expanded my mind to this, that I was like, oh, I get it. So it's also that other thing that I write when I'm like, oh, what happens? Like, why am I the Black girl who finds like golf interesting? Let me write an essay about that. And then I was like, oh, that's what we're doing. Like, we're taking, two aspects of someone's identity and smushing them together and allowing them to, really explore who they are in these two various aspects. Over time, it's become, I've just been curious about how people take those, two or three aspects of their identity and put them together. And it's been more an amalgamation of, or rather, I should say, it's been more of an evolution of, how creatively can they do that in terms of form, and how can they do that not just in terms of telling a chronological story, but how do they challenge themselves? How does the author, who's ultimately the narrator generally of this personal essay, challenge themselves to say, what is my sense of agency in this particular part of my culture? What are the questions that I can ask about this other aspect of this culture, and particularly as it pertains to my identity? And I know it sounds really abstract, but it's only because I've kind of allowed it to expand into that sense of abstraction. And I think it's been really beautiful, the work that we've been able to publish as a result of looking at it so sort of not so rigidly. It's been truly an honor, and definitely an evolution for me as an editor to say, all right, does this work? Does this not quite work? And I think this also speaks to the subjectivity. I think as a writer, I no longer take rejections as personally, because as an editor, I now have to make choices. Someone submitted a beautiful essay that was about a particular hard rock star from the 80s. And I was vaguely familiar with this person, and I had to Google him. And then I was like, oh wait, I do know who that is. And there was something like that was like a perfectly well-formed essay, but because it was something that I wasn't familiar with, that I couldn't quite have that emotional connection to, I did wind up turning it down. And then for me, that experience as a writer was like, oh, okay, so this actually is just wow, this is incredibly subjective, because I was like, no, that essay goes completely and totally fine on a craft basis. It was just, there was a cultural piece that just didn't quite click for me. So yeah, it's been an ongoing evolution that has gotten more abstract and more wonderful. And I'm just really thrilled for what we've got coming down the pike.
Yeah, I remember, like, we had a lot of conversations. I think that's what's really cool too about the offing, like getting to kind of chat with each other as we're talking through pieces, and really also like questioning our own perspective, and having someone else to kind of talk through that with is really helpful. I want to get to this question from Lee Lai. Lee, I see you popped on camera. I don't know if you feel comfortable asking it on camera if you want me to read the question.
Yeah, sure, I can ask it. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Hi, everyone, and it's good to meet everyone and hear your backgrounds. It's exciting. So as an editor myself, I also work in this space, and I also focus on making sure that I'm trying to build up the community of writers that I'm working with, not just, being the editor. But I'm curious about how you guys find your creators and your young talent, all these emerging artists. Do you actively sometimes reach out, find people who are clearly not on this traditional trajectory that so many people will go to college and do, and they know all of the tricks, they know the email templates? Then there's other artists who just have no idea, but they're really exciting artists. So can any of you guys speak to whether or not there is an active outreach, or whether or not you guys are inundated with interest and it's not even part of the job?
I can talk about the poetry section of that. As far as like the kinds of submissions we get in, we receive, there's such a wide range of submissions, so we don't necessarily have to go out and seek that. I think that many of the submissions that we get, I also go through their bios and kind of Google some of the information that they put in their bios. Many of the submissions we get are from people that are either in grad school or completing grad school, or have published things in the past. So there's already sort of an established kind of way to their work. But I think in terms of the what is outlined in the offing's mission, I think for many of the representations in the poetry sections, because there's such a wide range, we can place that diversity in what the mission states about the work itself, because like I said earlier on, the submissions come from all parts of the world and from a lot of different paths that people are walking. So for us in the poetry section, there's already that diversity that is there in the submissions that are coming in. And the quality of the work, again, is there in the submissions. One of the things that I probably have a hard time discerning is which work to pass through, because the quality of work that we receive, it's great. I mean, it's there, but again, it's just the decisions that we have to make from that. I hope that answers the question on the poetry section.
I would add.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I would add I think we also get a good number of submissions for Insight. Now we get a good number of submissions, but I do try to keep my eye out for things that I see just kind of in the literary ether, be that Facebook or Twitter. And one other thing that I decided to do was, if I like the idea and it's a good idea that just needs some work on the execution, but I have pretty high confidence in the author's ability to beef up that execution, I will work with the author on a piece. I'll conditionally accept, and we can go back and forth for a good long while on getting that piece more fully formed. So I guess I would say it's not necessarily that I'm only publishing people who have been really have really extensive publishing backgrounds. There is that sense of, I think we've had a number of debuts in Insight, especially, but yeah, very willing to work with folks who, have a really solid idea and are great writers, but just need a little bit more help getting to there. Do that all the time.
I'm curious.
I was just going to say thanks for answering, and also I guess I'm just jealous because I feel like a lot of the work that I do is sourcing writers. So it's great to hear that you guys get good submissions.
I
No,
also want to, sorry.
No, go ahead, please.
No, I just wanted to add that with the poetry section of the offering, I don't. I have to also thank that our readers, because in terms of the process of when the poems get to that point of being passed on to be published, there's this huge process that happens where the poetry readers really sift through a lot of that work before it comes to me. So when it finally comes to me, then I have to sort of consider what has been happening prior. So I really have to just kind of give a lot of credit to the poetry readers sifting through that work until it finally gets to where I have to make those determinations to move it forward.
Bix, is there anything that you wanted to add to that? I know, like, editing Enumerate, which, you know, is like with the cross genre and having to explain that sometimes, that you might not get the same like volume of submissions. So I'm wondering if there's any strategies you employ to you know, get more diverse voices submitting to the department.
It's a great question, and I actually have been getting a lot of submissions, which makes me feel great because the quality of the submissions is really excellent. And it's, you know, we publish 11 pieces or 11 times a year for the Enumerate department mostly. Sometimes we will double dip and do 2 in a month or something like that. But, you know, the volume is there. But I have to confess, like, I am a person who really does not like being on social media. And so I contribute nothing towards soliciting people or even, you know, really actively promoting the offing to new writers. I think the offing social media does a lot for us on its own. Like the social media folks just are always, I feel like they're part of the literary universe. But like Vonetta, what I feel like I can do better is, rather than trying to find people online whose work and I do sometimes solicit people if I see something that someone's written that would be that I'm interested in. But most of the time, I do like to work with authors who are kind of newer and spend a little, you know, that's like the space where I feel like I'm willing, that's an investment I would love to make with an author to help develop the piece or, you know, see sort of where they want to take it in a way that's perhaps more fitting with what Enumerate is about. So yeah, I mean, I don't do very much online, unfortunately.
I wanted to bring in this question from Patrick. You know, what skills have you had to lean into or develop as an editor? And this can be for anyone.
I guess I'll start. I have 2 things. I've learned to, or no, I haven't learned yet. I am learning to be, you know, better with like getting things done on, or getting to the pile, the submissions in a more timely way. And I'm very fortunate to have a wonderful reader in Enumerate, Jacqueline, who's come on, and she's really helped to kind of get through a lot of readings. So, but I'm also trying to realize that and just be a little easier. Everybody's busy. Everybody's got a lot of stuff going on. It's never disrespectful. It's never intentionally disrespectful. I think, you know, management is just, it is what it is. I'm trying to get better at it. I think the number one thing that being an editor is always teaching me is that there's so many different ways to approach whatever work you're doing as a writer. And I love when people are playing with language in a way that's unexpected for me. I come from a very traditional realist writing background myself, and I tend to write realist fiction. So it's just, there's so much play that some of the writers bring in that I really appreciate and learn from. And I'll say one of the things that's hardest for me is to kind of give to not try to always mold the writing to what I think are the rigidities of language that I am accustomed to, and instead let the piece and the author's vision be more of a guide. And I think that's a hard balance sometimes as an editor, because we're all trained to sort of edit for clarity and correction, but sometimes ambiguity is the intention. And how do you work with that, for example? So.
I think for me, one thing that I'm still always struggling with as far as an editor is rejecting people. I'm still trying to figure out ways to make myself feel better about that. Because on the other side of that, I know what it feels like to be rejected, but then having to reject people's work, I think, is something that I didn't really experience before. But now that it's one of the roles I have to play, it makes the job a little bit difficult to do, because then you have to like narrow down all these submissions to a workable pool to push through to the next level. But yeah, I think for me, that's one of the things that I always look at, is how to make myself feel a lot better about sending out rejections to people.
No, that is great, because the thing I would say has been developing. Okay, fine. I'm just gonna edit myself. So maybe developing intuition, but also learning how to trust that intuition. And so similar to Crisosto, I was like, oh God, I don't want to have to reject all of these pieces. At the same time, we can only publish so many of them. I'm publishing 11 essays a year. So I get well more than 11 essays in the slush pile. So it had to be learning how to trust my intuition of what is going to be a good fit. And if, like I said earlier, if it's a really great idea, but the essay might just be a draft or two away, do I trust my intuition enough to be able to work with the author on that? So yeah, honing that intuition and actually like trusting it, I think, has been the biggest skill that I have developed as an editor. Looking at hundreds of things and saying, what is close enough to being ready. But then what will I feel great about publishing? What's going to make the offing really shine, and what's going to make this author shine and feel really proud of the work that they've done.
Yeah, no, it's really wonderful hearing everyone's sort of thought process and what's happening behind the scenes. I think with this time that we have left, I wanted to pose a question that's open to everyone, but what energizes you as an editor? Like, what motivates you to keep doing this work? Because it is work, and we're doing a lot of labor. We're all volunteers, so we're doing this work for free, but out of love and passion. And so I'm curious what pushes you to keep doing it.
Yeah, I sometimes, I don't really tell people this, but I sometimes pay to do this work because I generally do it on weekends, and I sometimes have to hire a babysitter in order to focus on it. So I'm like, I sometimes have to pay $25 an hour to do this work I love. But to me, it really is that, what are the really unique stories that the world has to hear? And I think for me, that going back to that rubric, it's like, is this a story that the world has to hear? That it's that, oh my gosh. So I would say actually all the stories that we have or essays that we have in the pipeline for Insight, when I read them, in Slush, it was like, oh my gosh, the world has to hear this. And they're all just these really unique, beautiful in their own way stories that, there was that immediate like level of quirkiness and confidence from the writer that, just that was what excited me about these particular pieces, and it excites me about continuing to read Slush to find those nuggets and to pay someone $25 an hour to be able to do it.
I think quickly, just for me, it's the enjoyment of reading other people's work. I think for me, if that moment's, because again, it goes back to this idea of diversity. I'm learning a lot more by the work that I engage with. So it kind of feels like if I stop doing that, then there's this idea that kind of goes with it that doesn't feed the idea of being able to engage in the wide range of voices that come through the offing. For me, I think that's the most exciting part about being an editor, is looking at the work and seeing how different that is in terms of the scope of work that I've seen and what I read in my books or what I'm exposed to on social media. I mean, the offing, each time that we get our submission pool open, it's just amazing to see the huge range of diversity. And I think that's what keeps pushing me.
I have to say that, especially in the times that we're in, where there's so much at us all the time, for me, the most exciting thing is to spend close time and attention on one piece at a time. I think it's because I'm not line by line, phrase by phrase, and then working with an author. It's just really special to have the opportunity to do that.
Yeah, I feel you, Bix. Sometimes I think what maybe nourishes our own writing practice is feeling like we're in kind of community or connection with other people, and that it can be a very lonely place if you're just writing alone. So I think getting the chance to read other people's work, to also feel like I'm helping other people bring their work into the offing, that I think I feel like it's in some ways sometimes more rewarding than maybe even tackling your own languishing project. So yeah, I definitely feel that. We're at 6 o'clock, so I want to just three of you so much for joining me today and like talking about these things. I think a lot of times we're kind of nose to the grindstone, like doing all the work we have to do to publish regularly. And so having a chance like this to kind of share these larger ideas is really meaningful. So thank you so much. I really appreciate all of you, and I can't wait to see you in person the next time we can get together. So thank you, everyone, and thank you for joining us today.